Now let's just talk about some operations, some more operations related to the VM. So let's say, you receive a request as an administrator. There is a server and it needs a public IP address. So how will you allocate a public IP address to a server? Can somebody tell me?
You associate it, no?
Yep. All right. So you will first need to create a public IP address, and then you will associate that public IP address to the virtual machine's network interface. That's the process of doing it. So let's see, how do we create a public IP address real quick. In the search, we'll type PUB. It shows public IP address. Right now, I only have one public IP address, which is attached to my Bastion host. So I'll create a new public IP address real quick. I will select the IP version as IPv4, SKU as standard. There are two types of public IP address, basic and standard. Standard are costlier and basic are cheaper. So I'll select a basic public IP address. However, your virtual machine SKU also needs to be taken into consideration. If you've created a standard virtual machine, then you need to take a standard. So I'll take a standard. Tier means regional, global. Regional global means the standard public IP, if you take regional, which means you can only use it in that region. If you take a global public IP, then you actually can use that IP in other regions as well. So if you take a global IP, then it will be more costlier to you. I would rather suggest you to create a regional IP and use it in the same region. There is no point of creating global IPs. Let's say you want an IP to be used in Europe, West Europe. Create that IP in West Europe. Why to create an IP in East US and then use it in West Europe and pay more money to Microsoft? But Microsoft is giving you all the options. I mean, so there are times when they want to give you some, some freedom, and you actually exercise that freedom and you end up paying more to Microsoft, and it actually doesn't mean anything to you. So always use regional. You can put it a name, sample PIP, and DNS. If you want to see DNS also, you can also put a DNS name against this IP. If you want to use this IP for a website, something, then you can select a resource group where you want to create this IP, and location East US. Availability zone you can select for this IP. If you're going to allocate this IP to a VM which is in availability zone, then you need to select the same availability zone for the IP as well. All the resources will get into the same availability zone or same availability set, so that they all are redundant. They all remain available at the same time, and if there's an outage, it happens to all of them at the same time. So I'll create this public IP. All right, public IP is getting created. Public IP is getting, is creation done. I'll refresh, I'll see my public IP. Now, in order to allocate this public IP to a virtual machine NIC, I can select the public IP and I can see this option associate. I can directly associate this public IP from here itself. So I need to select the load balance, select the resource to which I'm going to associate. The resource is a network interface, and then I can select that network interface. So see, I have two network interfaces.
Hello.
Hello.
Okay, I can hear you.
Raghu, we lost you. We cannot hear you, Raghu.
Yeah.
Raghu, you are not audible.
I'm not speaking.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I was just waiting for the portal to come up. Okay, you can hear me, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
so I'll go to that VM. I told you the first option, which is to provision a public IP, and then on the public IP blade, you can associate it to a VM. Let's say you don't want to do that, you want it in a different manner. So that's the another option. You go to that resource or the VM on which you want to associate the public IP. And as I said, anything related to networking, you should always do it at the NIC level. So you'll go to the networking, you will select the NIC network interface, which is this. Then you will click on IP configurations. Then you see the strip IP config, click here. And here you see an option of associate, public IP associate. So you can click on associate. It gives you another option. And in the drop down, you can select that public IP. So there are two public IPs. It says can be associated. This IP can be associated. It says cannot be associated. This cannot be. Why? Because this is already in use. So you can select the public IP here and you can just hit save. So these are the two methods by which you can associate a public IP to a resource. That resource could be a load balancer or a virtual machine. Done. So this VM has now got the public IP, saved network interface. If I go back to the VM overview blade, I'll see that public IP now. So that's how you associate a public IP to a VM. Okay, let me ask you this question. What if I want to associate another IP address to my VM? Private IP, not public IP. Public IP you have seen. If I have another public IP and I say, can you associate that to my VM? You will first dissociate the existing one and then associate the new one. That's okay. But what if I say that, you know what, my virtual machine's IP address is 1.4. I actually need 1.15. How can I get it?
With a static IP.
Yep, absolutely. Thanks. So go back to the same NIC IP configuration, IPv4, and then here you put static and you type 15. That's it. If this 15 is available, then save it. It will work. If it is already taken, you will get an error here itself. That's how you get the new private IP address on the VM. Done.
How can we change the subnet of that IP?
We'll come to that. So now the IP address of the VM is 15. I'll just refresh it. You will see it there. Yep, it's 15 now. So these are some of the administrative use cases that you will deal with day in, day out while you work as an Azure administrator. Now, the next question, how can I change the subnet of my VM? It's too simple. Same option. Now, while you're doing all of this exercise, guys, your VM has to be in stop deallocated mode. While the VM is up and running, you cannot change its public IP. You cannot remove its public IP. You cannot make the IP address allocation from static to dynamic. The VM has to be in stop deallocated mode to perform all of these activities. Now, the next, you said, how can I change the subnet of my VM? It's simple. Again, go to the networking, and here, go to the network interface, click on IP configurations, and right now the subnet is web. You can select any of the subnet, but there's a challenge. The challenge is you have just put IP address allocation as static on the VM, and the IP address is .15. If I take this VM to app subnet, this VM should receive an IP address which is 192.168.1.36, which is the first available IP address. But the IP address allocation for the VM is static. I will first need to change the allocation from static to dynamic. Then only I can change the subnet of the VM. See, this will not work. I'll select app subnet and it says static IP address do not exist in this subnet. That's the reason. So you will first need to go back to the IP config and you can make it dynamic once again. and save it. Now you're making it dynamic. Once it becomes dynamic, then you can change the subnet of this VM. You can move it to app subnet, database subnet, or any subnet of your choice, except Western host subnet, gateway subnet, or any other subnet which are delegated to a service. So it's dynamic now. Just go back to the previous screen, and now you can select app subnet or whatever you want. See, you've selected app subnet, save it. Now the VM is moving to app subnet, and whatever IP is available in the app subnet, which I believe is 1.36, it should capture. Done. It's saved. I'll go back to my VM view overview, refresh the screen, and I've got the IP. 192.168.1.36, which proves that my VM is in app subnet. It is also available underneath. You see, Raghuveer VNet 1 app subnet. That's the subnet. So that's how I change the subnet of my VM from here and there.